Higher education is one of Australia's biggest exports now. Hosting international students is a $40 billion business, and 30% of that was brought in by Chinese students last year, followed by from India, Nepal and Vietnam. Researchers at education think tank the Mitchell Institute estimate in the unlikely event borders open from next year, the sector will have lost $10 billion. But if difficulties getting into the country drag on, unis could lose up to $19 billion over the next 3 years. And the revenue hit is already taking a huge toll, with redundancies and cancellations of research and programs. And it's not just university campuses affected. Every dollar lost in tuition fees means $1.15 lost in the broader economy, because students do spend money. More than a third of international student spending is on hospitality and retail. And they're not an insignificant proportion of the population either, exceeding 30% in some inner city and campus suburbs. One sector reeling from the shock to student numbers is purpose-built student accommodation. There are hundreds of privately owned developments reliant on rental revenue, largely from international students. As Stephanie Chalmers reports, providers say they could be part of the solution for bringing students back on shore.
It's mid-morning, so empty seats aren't an uncommon sight in student housing, but the halls are unusually quiet this year. Jonathan Glixton runs Igloo, which houses university students off campus in inner Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane.
Typically, it will range between 60% to 80% international students and the remainder domestic students.
COVID-19 has kept thousands of international students from entering the country, and those existing students that have stayed are observing social distancing.
We've seen our occupancy, which would typically be around 95% plus, it's been halved by COVID.
It's a huge market actually.
This precinct in Sydney is walking distance to several universities and a short bus trip to others. Igloo alone has 3 student accommodation facilities within a few hundred metres of each other.
You're seeing a lot of overseas wealth funds, pension funds and sovereign wealth funds actually investing into the market. It's interesting that it forms a real estate investment, but it's also seen by a number of these groups as almost a form of infrastructure.
There are 113,000 purpose-built student beds across the country and a further 45,000 in the pipeline. Thousands of those beds are currently empty. Last year, tens to hundreds of thousands of international students arrived each month. In April this year, just 30 people arrived on student visas. The most recent figures show that in July, there were just 40 arrivals.
How long have you been in the country?
Seema Shah has worked in international student recruitment for nearly 2 decades. She says with the on-campus experience compromised, students are also leaving.
I've been talking to a few other agencies also and friends, and they all are saying the same thing, that students are going back.
There was a pilot program in the works that would have seen several hundred international students return to universities in Canberra, but the second wave of coronavirus in Victoria put that on hold. A new pilot that will see up to 300 international students return to South Australia is due to get off the ground this month. But both the federal and state governments have told the business the details are yet to be finalised, including which countries those students will come from. A major hurdle is the cap on international arrivals put in place by the states. Federal Education Minister Dan Tehan says it's up to the premiers to ensure that no international students take the spot of an Australian trying to return home from overseas. Returning students will need somewhere to quarantine, and the solution could be found close to campus.
Student accommodation facilities don't allow anyone else in, so they could really play a key role in providing quarantine hotels of their own type to help get students back in.
We're working really closely with the state governments and the universities to try and achieve that.
But even if restrictions ease early next year, the disruption will continue to be felt. And a diplomatic row with the biggest international student market, China, is a threat to the recovery.
it will take a few years to recover from this sort of crisis once we actually start getting students coming back in that first year, to then convert them to second and third years and actually build that pipeline that actually helps fill the beds.
The impact COVID-19 has caused, I think it will take at least 3 years if Australia plays its cards smartly to attract international students.
Social distancing unlikely to be a problem anytime soon.